Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of From Page to Stage. Today, I have the joy and delight of introducing you to Frank Agin. Now, Frank is a prolific author and podcaster based in the US. I'm going to let him tell a bit more about his story. Frank, can you give us a little introduction to you, please?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on. Let's just start there. I really appreciate this. You're recording from Kuala you have to say it for me. Kuala Lumpur, right? Is that it? I get it. Anyhow, a long ways away. And so I can check that off my bucket list. But I'm in the United States. I'm in the central part of the United States, Columbus, Ohio, for those who are stateside. I came to Columbus 40 years ago to go to law school, have a law degree, have an MBA. I started my career in public accounting and as a tax consultant. I always had the notion that to succeed in life, you did well in school, you accumulated credentials, and that's how it worked. And it doesn't work that way because I left the firm one day to go into private practice. At that point, I had a CPA. I was a certified public accountant as well. And I just figured with all of that, literally more letters after my name than in my name, I would be unstoppable. And the funny thing was that nothing happened. I had no idea how to get clients. And I asked a friend of mine one day, because I was deathly afraid of failing and having to go back into the corporate world. I asked her what I needed to do to become successful. And she said, you need to get into a tips club or a leads group. Well, I really had no idea what she was talking about. And through a couple of introductions, she introduced me to an organization that brought together entrepreneurs, sales reps, and professionals into a weekly meeting where people learned about each other, developed relationships, and exchanged referrals. If you're familiar with BNI, it wasn't BNI, but if you're familiar with BNI, it's something very similar to BNI. I took to it like a fish to water. It made total sense to me, Wendy, that I could lift up my whole world just helping other people and trusting that they would do the same for me. And at one point, I'll shorten the story, at one point had an opportunity to buy the organization. That was in 2003, over 20 years ago. And I did. And I made the decision to stop practicing law and become what I call a student of networking, learning why professional relationships work, why they don't work, why people get referrals and why people don't get referrals, really digging into the science of all these things and forming my own opinions as to, why things were happening, why this person who's horribly charismatic, I shouldn't say horribly, wonderfully charismatic, can't get any business. And somebody who can't butchers the king's English is overrun with work. And so that led me to writing books. My first book was called Foundational Networking, and was just kind of my thought process on really what networking was.
So that was a while ago, wasn't it? That was 2008.
Yeah, it was 2008. Yeah. It took me a couple of years to pull it all together and kind of get all my thoughts down. And one book led to the next, which led to the next, which led to the next. And in 2018, I was doing some things to try and market the business. And I've always really been about just sharing what I know and trusting that, hey, people who want to work with me will find me. And it works to a degree. But at any rate, somebody was trying to get me to set up a sales funnel, which I just didn't really feel like it was for me. And I told him, I don't think this is for me. And he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I just want to share good content. I just want to help people. And that will attract people to me. He said, well, you're talking about a podcast. And I said, well, maybe I am. Maybe I am. My daughter was in college at the time, and she was interning for me. And I was going to be out of town for a week. I had a business trip. And her name is Logan. I just said, Logan, can you look into this podcasting thing for me? And I came back a week later and she had it all outlined for me. This is what you need to do. Here, we'll download this software. Here it all is. It was great. And, I was all thumbs for a little bit trying to just figure out, okay, how do you work this? I don't want to, we all make mistakes. I made mistakes. I remember calling people just mortified that I loaded the wrong file. Oh my God. Yeah, the unedited file got, and they didn't care. But that's
Real
how I
and
ended up.
raw.
What's that?
Real and raw.
Yeah, it was just, the conversation before you, like you start this, you hit record, you start. Well, I
Yeah.
would hit record, we would talk, and then I would edit out that little talking, You learn things along the way,
Hmm.
how to load up the right files, how to mark things, whatever. But I tell people two things. One, writing a book will change your life, but not in ways that you think it'll change your life. I didn't get rich doing it. Nobody really gets rich doing it unless your name is Bill Clinton or Prince Andrew or something like that. You're probably
If you
not
have a
making.
reputation before you write the book,
Yes.
then it helps. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a great calling card. It opened a lot of doors for me. Opportunities to speak, credibility, to be in a room and have somebody actually quote you. And it's like, okay.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's like, really? There was something I said in one of my books, and somebody said, well, that really hit me and kind of changed how I think about things. And it's like, wow, okay. Never really saw myself that way. But then I also say having a podcast will open doors that you didn't know were there.
Right.
And
Okay, so
it's
you've got the book, because there have been a few in between.
yeah.
You've got the podcast. So if I'm right, the book came before the speaking?
No, I
Before
was
the
always
podcast, yes, but you were speaking before you wrote the book?
Oh yeah, I was always asked to come out and talk on certain things, and
Mhm.
the notion or the theme of foundational networking is that networking skills and tactics don't work. And I shouldn't say they don't work, but all things being equal, it really comes down to the people that have the right habits and attitudes about themselves, about others, about their propensity to give to the world around them. That's what it is. That's your foundation.
It's the
Um,
giving attitude rather than the gimme, 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 gimme.
yeah, yeah. And that takes on many forms. Um, you need to have a strong presence about you. Nobody wants to hang out with a mope. I mean, we feel sorry for people for a little bit, right? I'm sorry you lost your job, but at some point you just want to distance yourself from that. And so I talked about that, but those were things that I was talking about in little bits and pieces leading up to that. I was reading a lot on networking and, talks there's a lot of wonderful books out there, and they talk tactics and strategies, and this is what you do. And there were people out there that had great tactics and strategies, but, just to keep it clean, they were butt heads, and you knew that they weren't genuine.
Mm.
Um, and it didn't matter what they had the greatest tactics in the world. Wow, that was an awesome 30-second commercial. I don't want to work with you. And so
Where are
that's,
you in that? Where's the connection, the authenticity? Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. And so that, you start to really think about things when it becomes your business. I think we all, if you're a farmer, you really dig into why farming works and why it doesn't work. And it's kind of the same thing. So I was speaking, I was out there talking, and okay, I need to put this stuff down and have a book. And I saw people who had books and what that did for them. And, you don't get rich doing it, but I, was invited into places and would speak and have books there and sell them for $10 a piece, and walk away with $500 cash, which seemed, it's not a lot of money, but it's $500 cash.
Absolutely. It's kind of passive income because it's on the back of you speaking.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
kind of where we're at with a lot of our audience, in that they've poured their heart and soul out into the book.
yeah,
And sometimes they're telling some quite traumatic origin stories.
yeah,
You want me to talk about that? Get
yeah.
up on stage?
Well,
And
what I
the stage
yeah,
thing doesn't have to be a live stage in person
no,
in front of an audience to start with. You can start off with something like a podcast.
yeah, yeah. I mean, these things kind of are circular or they're cyclical or, they're all interrelated, I guess is a better word for it. I find that people take their content in lots of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Some people love video. Some people love to read.
Yeah.
Some people like to have a Kindle, sit down with a Kindle. Some people like to have a book, and they like to mark it up. Yeah.
Some people
Yeah.
like to listen to it.
Right. Some people like little bite-sized nuggets. So I was taking the book that I wrote and turned it into 240 little posts, and then when the podcast came along, and one of the big challenges that podcasters think they face, in reality, you don't. Do I have enough to say? Do I have enough material? But I could always look at the book and say, okay, or the books and say, okay, you know what? I can devote a whole episode on this one chapter, you know, and then I could devote a whole episode to this one paragraph in this one chapter. So here I am now. I recorded an episode this morning. It was 712.
Wow.
And
712. I really do need to do a little bit of investigation as to what the percentage is, because they talk about the top however many percent of podcasters. But my understanding is there are a lot of podcasts out there, but there are also a lot of podcasts with maybe 10 episodes and then they fail. They fall. I won't say fail, but they stop. So you're doing phenomenally well.
Yeah. I mean, if you go to listennotes.com and you put your podcast name in there, it'll do an analysis for you. I'm in the top 2.5%, top 2.5% global rankings.
Go you.
Wendy, I didn't know. I was talking to somebody and they said, let me look you up. And they looked me up.
Listen.com.
I think it's .com, listennotes.com. Okay. Yeah.
Listennotes.com. Sorry.
Yeah. But, you kind of get into a cadence and every week I'm probably producing 2 episodes, either interviewing somebody or just sharing information myself.
So yours is a combination, a mixture of personal, you delivering your content and also interviewing other people. Is that right? Yep. Okay. So for you, speaking came first and then you went back to the page.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're now batting backwards and forwards because obviously as you're doing your own podcast and you're speaking on other stages, you're using the information from your book. And that then becomes extra, as you said, passive income, that it may not be it's not your primary source of income, but it doesn't go amiss, does it, when you get a few more sales under your belt?
No, how life is woven together is really kind of a mystery. You just have to get out there and kind of live it. And, the people who will tell you, here's a foolproof plan. It's like, you know what? Your plan has a sample size of 1. You did it once and it worked. Congratulations. Today is a different day. What I have to say is different. My audience is different. It may not work. So, doesn't mean that it can't work, but it doesn't mean
I'm a great believer in the phrase, try it on for size.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is what's worked for me. This is what I've seen work for other people as well. This is what I've seen work with my clients. Give it a go. See what happens. Try it on for size.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. So we know that you back and forth, but the speaking came before the page. Yeah. Okay. Got it. So you've got this network that you run. It's physically based in Ohio?
Well, my offices are in Ohio, but I have franchisees around the United States.
Right.
Starting groups, in different places around the United States, and that continues to grow. So it's, it's an
and
ongoing.
You have an online version, don't you?
Well, the networking hub where you and I met, where I invited you into, is, Wendy, that's just something I did in the beginning of COVID. You know what? I can't go anywhere. I can get on Zoom and I can talk to a lot of people. Hey, this is
Yes.
really neat. I enjoy connecting people and seeing what it does for them.
Mm.
Doesn't always have to do something for me. And that's where the networking hub was born. And, it's a lot of neat people come on there, and a lot of neat things happen. And,
Mm. I
you know,
mean, that's, don't get me wrong, COVID was a really tough time for an awful lot of people,
sure. Yeah.
but there were blessings in it. And the fact that we all had to go online,
Yeah.
and oh, hello, there's a world out there
Yeah.
that I would not have, prior to that, wouldn't have even thought about talking to.
Yeah.
We had IWD recently, International Women's Day, and I did a quick count up. I went through my friend list. I know women from 44 different countries.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's happened prior to COVID.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are little gifts in adversity. If
Yeah.
we,
Little silver linings. Oh, absolutely.
mm,
I have to date have two people who've gotten married. I'm not a matchmaker, but it's like, hey, you should talk. You do some business together. And then I find out they're dating, now they're living together. Oh my God, you guys are in different countries. you know?
whoa,
Yeah.
matchmaker, matchmaker, make me a match.
Yeah, there you go.
Brilliant. But that, I
Yeah,
mean, when you have like-minded people coming together, there will be that deeper connection.
yeah.
So what I'm hearing from you is that your psychology of networking delves in a bit deeper than the old sort of spray and pray with your business cards. You
Oh
actually
yeah.
get to know people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's um I mean, you can't close somebody on a relationship, right? I mean, somebody's coming in to buy a car or buy a widget or whatever, you can close the sale,
Mm-hmm.
you know, take my course, you can close that. But to have a relationship with somebody, you both people have to say, yeah, this is what we want, you know? And that's really, that's certainly true in marriages. It's true amongst business people who have come together, and it's true amongst people who are networking partners. It's like, I'm committed to helping you. I'm not exactly sure how, but I'm committed to helping you, and I trust that you're going to do something for me. I'm not going to keep track of it. Um, It'll work itself out. Maybe maybe you never return it directly to me, but by virtue of the fact that I have helped you become successful, that rising tide will raise my boat somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
You know?
I was talking one of the other guests that I've like you have come up for the podcast launch. She was saying that she worked with a company and they got so much success from her ideas and from what the work they were doing. When the owner sold the company, he gave her a bonus because he said, I would never have made that much money off selling the business if it hadn't been for the work that we've done.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You never know when things are going to come back and go, thank you.
Yeah. No, you don't. You don't. And it's um yeah, it's a fun thing. It really is.
Excellent, excellent. So tell us a bit more about your network. You've got how many individual franchises?
Well, individual franchises, I'm right around 20. I've got a couple people signing on this week. As far as groups or chapters, we call them out there, it's approaching 140. And I have some franchisees are just go-getters. And I have some who, it's something they do. And both are fine, both are fine. But our groups, for the most part, are in-person groups. When the COVID lockdown hit, everybody went on Zoom rather quickly. We figured that out in a hurry because we had to.
We had to, yeah.
I mean, small business types are amazing individuals. Nobody's going to lift them up. They're just going to do it, right? That's you, that's me, that's millions of other people around the world. Just, I'm going to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a woman who's a massage therapist. She's obviously not doing anything, but she was selling gift certificates, we're going to come
Mm-hmm.
out of this and,
Yes.
just keep me alive. And people are like, okay, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But all of my groups went online, and when the lockdown ended, and it varied in different states, but when the lockdown ended, I gave everyone a choice. I said, you can stay online if you choose, or you can go in person. The only thing I asked of them is, if they went back in person, is to be respectful of people who might not quite be comfortable coming back.
Yes.
People lived with individuals who had compromised situations. Don't force them to come back. Provide an avenue so they can be online with you.
Mm-hmm.
But 95% of our groups went back to in person. And the 5% that didn't were groups that really started during the lockdown, and they just,
Yeah.
I mean, they, if you will, you have people from different parts of Australia where it just makes no sense for them to come together. So,
Yes. Big place.
yeah. Yeah. And well, even like the state of Massachusetts, you could be 2 hours from somebody.
Mm.
And so, I mean, there are people out there that say, well, nobody wants to go to in-person networking anymore. And my response to that is, you're right. 100% of the people who don't want to go to in-person networking don't want to go to in-person networking. But the people who do, yeah, there's quite a few people out there that want to be in the room with somebody. And, there's something special about human connection.
Absolutely. One of the other interviews I've done for this launch was a live one, a real live person sitting next to them, and I could poke him.
Oh, there you go.
I did. I actually recorded that in his studio. He's actually got a podcast studio.
Oh,
So
awesome.
we've got different camera angles, and he's got the slider with the effects of canned applause and all that. Great fun. It was curious though how I was out of my depth. I'm so used to being here in front of the camera with the light and the screen, and suddenly, oh no, this real person. There is undoubtedly a different quality of connection. But even when you are online, I feel that you can still have that energetic experience. You can still have that connection and connect, sort of head and heart. And that head and heart goes through your voice.
Yeah.
So this is where our audience are maybe feeling a little bit reluctant to actually take that first step and speak on a stage. So this is why the podcast is really a useful, putting your toe in the water.
Yeah.
So your podcast guests, let's backtrack for a second. Who's the audience that you speak to in your podcast?
Well, I would imagine small business types, because a lot of the things, that's my frame of reference as to where networking works the most. I realize that's kind of a narrow view of the world, maybe not terribly narrow, but there are people out there who network and for career purposes, for personal purposes. But mainly I'm speaking to small business types. I mean, when I originally started it, it was like, okay, here's something I can share with my, the hundreds of people in the organization. And I do have a lot of those people listening. I'll go to a chapter and I was working out this morning listening to you. There's songs out there. I wouldn't be listening to me. Go work out listening to a song. But that's generally the audience.
Okay, cool. So the reason I'm asking this is because our audience are primarily non-fiction writers. So that they've, as I said to you, they've poured heart and soul into the book. They've got their origin story in there. They've got wisdom that they want to share with the world. So a lot of them are actually entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Is it something that, you'd be open to having members of our audience as podcast guests?
Potentially. There are three types of things I'll do in my podcast. One, it's just me talking. This morning, I recorded an episode. It won't be out until June. I talked about micro small talk conversations, just talking to the checkout barista. How's your day going? Right? Just little things like that. And there's actually science out there that shows it makes everybody happier. It's just a great thing. And you can learn things, right? You never know. So it'll be me just talking. I will interview what I call thought leaders, experts on relationships, networking, referral best practices. And I'm somewhat liberal about that because I look at relationships, professional relationships, as being very closely aligned to personal relationships. God gave us one brain. There's not a special compartment for business. How we develop trust in a personal relationship is the same as how we develop trust in a professional relationship. And sometimes people will have wonderful professional careers and a personal life that's, a dumpster
Questionable.
fire. Yes, yeah, and vice versa, and it's like, you know what? See how you treat your employees? Maybe treat family that way, or vice versa. So that's the second, types of people that I will interview. People who can share something around relationships. And then the third thing I will talk on is I call these episodes Expedition Networking. People who've had really unique experiences with networking, how they've used it. For example, I had a guy who came on and shared the story as to how his grandfather escaped the Holocaust in the late 30s through networking.
Really?
Just a fact. It was just quickly, what his grandfather did was went to the library, copied the names of everybody who had his surname in Chicago, Illinois, because somebody had ripped out the pages for New York. And he wrote everybody a letter just saying, listen, I need help. And somebody came through and got him papers, and, said, hey, Bob Leibowitz is my cousin, and go to the embassy. You have papers, come to the United States. And he came to Chicago. And my guest said, I am prolific at helping other people. And the reason I'm prolific at helping other people is somebody did something for my grandfather, and that's why I'm here. And I'll never be able to repay that person because they're dead. So only thing I can do is pay it forward. That's just an awesome story.
I've just got all goosey. What a wonderful tale.
Yeah. And so they don't always rise to that level. I've had people on who were in the Gulf War, in not special forces, but intelligence, gathering intelligence, and develop, how do you develop a relationship with somebody who might blow you up, or could have you killed,
Yes.
And that was a very interesting conversation. But, others are just how people. I had one guy on, he shared a story about how this was back in the 80s. He was selling insurance and he was dialing for dollars every day, just calling people, 50 calls a day or whatever. And one of his clients had him come out to deliver a policy, and they were sitting there talking. He reached over and grabbed the phone off the wall. Remember those phones, right?
Oh, I do. With the very long cords. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. The pigtails. And he called the neighbor and said, hey, I'm going to send Rusty over to you. He got me a policy. It's exactly what you need. And at that point, Rusty's like, you know what? I need to go to all my clients and start asking for referrals. Yes. And that was his epiphany. Now, for most people, it's like, oh yeah, that's common sense. Well, except for the people who don't do that. The people who've gotten the training, you need to call 1 million people every day to make it work.
I have a bit of a phrase when it comes to common sense. What's common sense to one person is rocket science to another.
Yeah.
Don't underestimate your common sense for somebody else.
Yeah. So those are types of people that I will have on. but I always, I invite people, reach out to me. Um, it might not be my show, but it might be somebody else's show.
There you go. Your networking referrals.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're interviewing Dr. Rob Bell,
Mhm.
and I don't know if his will come out before mine or after mine. But my wife's grade school friend, high school friend, her daughter is an Olympic shot putter. It's like, well, she doesn't fit on my podcast, but what an interesting story for Rob's podcast, which is all about mental toughness and, athletic and business preparedness,
Mm.
so and I think that's just how the podcast world works. It's,
Yeah.
it doesn't fit in my, world. You're a round peg in my square hole, but there's somebody else over here.
Mm.
So
Well, that's the thing. I mean, one of the reasons that when I have people on my podcast, I do a preliminary conversation with them, is we need to check out, is this the right fit for both of us?
yeah,
Yesterday, actually twice in the last few days, I've had a conversation with somebody who on paper was brilliant, but actually the timing was wrong. It wasn't going to be the right time for my audience for what they wanted to say. And I go, okay, we'll come back to you, say, in 3 months' time, when we've got a bit more do this confidence.
Well, I think a lot of it is things happen for a reason. I mean, I've had podcasts that have episodes that have lined up, and circumstances just intervene, and power outages, whatever it might be, and they were scheduling 3 weeks later. And in that 3 weeks, something happens that's really cool that you get to talk about, right? It's almost like God saying, you know what, let's just wait on this. There's something better. You need to wait on this. So it just, things happen when they happen, and so.
A no is not necessarily an outright no. It's maybe a not now.
Yeah. What I will tell to your audience as far as trying to get on people's shows is, and I tell people, don't make me do the work. Hey, look at me, I'm wonderful, have me on. Why would you be wonderful? Don't, well, look at my resume, you figure it out. It's like, no, I want you to figure it out. I want you to politely pitch yourself to me and say, this is what I'm seeing. And I might say, well, I don't see that as a fit, and I don't routinely say that, but from time to time I'll say that. Maybe check with this person. I mean, there are a lot of podcasters out there, so there's no,
but there is plenty of opportunity to try put that toe in the water.
Yeah.
And with such, as I call it, context-specific confidence, most people are happy to have a conversation one-on-one with somebody.
Yeah.
And that's the joy of a podcast, because on the surface, it is one-on-one. What we have to remember, of course, is that we've got an awful lot of people dark, the unseen audience. And it's remembering to bring you guys into the conversation. Otherwise, you're basically earwigging on somebody else's conversation, and they're not.
Yeah.
But whilst it might be interesting, and you may pick up some very interesting thoughts, you want to be involved as well. The what's in it for me. So on that front, do you have any actionable steps that you put into place to take your words from page to stage?
Well, I think, a lot of it's just kind of thinking about it, right? I mean, I'm constantly on the lookout for good material. Whether I'm writing or, I'm a big fan of metaphors and analogies, because that helps people think. I have learned that certain things you can't say enough. I mean, don't repeat yourself every week saying the same thing, but if, every 3-6 months, I've talked about small talk before. I had a different angle on it today. Found an article in the New York Times, and it was just, quoting some research, and it was just a different take on it. I went with it. And I think from time to time we feel like, well, I've already said that. Yeah, you did, but you may have said it. There's a quote out there. It says, "No man walks into the same river twice, because for
Yes,
he's a different man and the river's a different river." So
exactly.
if you're saying the same thing, you're having a different audience. Because somebody new is discovering you.
Mm.
So every week I'll release an episode on Tuesday. It's generally me speaking. Wednesday's an interview, and then Friday's a recycle. Right, I'll recycle something from the
Okay.
past.
So you put
Uh,
out 3 a week.
yeah,
Woo.
but the third's kind of a cheater, right? Because it's already done. I just need to reschedule it.
Well, as you say, I
So,
mean, the thing is that we require to hear the same thing multiple times before it
yeah,
actually goes in.
yeah,
And it's when you live it, you actually put it into practice, that it makes that difference.
yeah,
So you've got your visual channel, your auditory channel, your kinesthetic channel. If you get all 3 of them working,
yeah,
I find when I'm learning something new, if I can look at it, listen to it, stop the recording, do it, start up again, I get there much quicker because I'm using all of those channels to understand and get the learning together.
yeah.
So,
But back to your question about actionable action, it just gets started. My
just
first, yeah, my first episode, Wendy, I don't remember the exact date. It was August of 2018. I came into the office on a Saturday and I spent 8 hours recording a 20-minute episode.
yeah.
I wanted to cry, right? I want to do this. I feel like I have something to say. I every I would try to edit out. I would start over. And it's just like, now this morning I had an article. I kind of had some outlines. I hit record, and 25 minutes later, I've got 18 minutes of content, and I've got to do the editing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I would just tell your people to, to just jump in, and even if it's one episode a month, I
Mhm.
guess that's another, yeah, go ahead and try and be on other people's podcasts.
Mm.
I think there's a lot more value to having your own and being in control of who comes onto your podcast. And stop and think about this. This is not you, Wendy, but the audience. Stop and think about it. If you get on somebody's podcast, and I've had this happen, they don't release it, they don't promote it, you know, they don't really do anything with it, you're totally out of control. But if you do a podcast and you interview people, they're going to be excited and they're going to get it out and they're going to get it amongst people. And you're going to build favor with those people. Other
Mm-hmm.
podcasters are going to say, I should get you on my show. And it's just, again, it's going to open doors you didn't know were there.
Yes.
I look at all the people that I know. Well, you've been in the networking hub. Many of them came about because of podcasting. And,
Mm-hmm.
you interview people, and hey, why don't you come into this? And so
That's what I would love our reluctant authors to get to down the track. To
yeah,
start with, we actually need to get them talking
yeah,
and being a guest, because
yeah,
I absolutely, you've echoed a sentiment that one of my other podcast launch party guests have exactly the same said. Got to get your own podcast together. We will get there, but let's get comfortable to start with. And as you say, just do it. Stop overthinking.
yeah. Well, there was a time where people were reluctant to have their own book
Mm-hmm.
because you had to have a publisher, you had to have all that stuff, and that's all gone away now. And I think the same thing will be happening with respect to podcasting. Podcasting will become a lot more acceptable. People will see the real value in it.
Yeah.
But the sooner you get on that, the sooner you get on, the better off you're going to be.
Yes.
The guy I know,
It's
Lewis Howes.
the more frequently you do it, the
Yep.
stronger you are.
Yep.
So as you say, just get on and do it. The
Yep.
listening audience.
Yep.
It.
There's a guy I know out there, Lewis Howes. He's got a top 10 podcast. He was trying to talk me into podcasting back in 2011. I'm like, Lewis,
Whoa.
you know,
That was early days.
Yeah, you know, um, I kicked myself. I wish I
Mhm.
would have listened.
Mm.
Because I would be, in the thousands of episodes and just
Mhm.
move myself along that much sooner, but that much quicker. But you
But
know
I mean,
what?
going back to the point that you were making right at the start, is that in the modern age we consume content in different modes, and
Yeah,
we said just now about visual, auditory, kinesthetic. So that kind of we need to tick everybody's boxes if we're going to make that head-heart connection. Gone are the days when I do it my way and you
yeah,
have to consume it the way I'm delivering it. No, it's that connection. If we want to reach out to our audience and build that connection with our audience visually, doing video work,
yeah,
auditorily, a lot of podcasts are audio only. This podcast, as you can see, is video primarily because with my background in speech pathology, I know how important it is to have the non-verbals, and also for those
right.
people who are lip reading. I haven't quite got to the caption stage yet, but I will do. So that's from the inclusive perspective. I like to go the video route, the audio route, and then of course you've got the how do you put it into practice physically, and that's where you have the physical stages to work
Yeah,
on as well. So yeah,
yeah,
how do your audience? What's in it for me is that always the the clarion cry of any content creator, isn't it? Look at it
yeah,
from the other person's perspective.
yeah.
Cool.
But I think there always is in things in it for people. I mean, I challenge your audience to stop and say, okay, why did I pick up a particular book to read it?
Mm,
And I would imagine, I'll speak for myself. I'm a sample size of one. I would imagine it's a lot like me in that, I read a quote somewhere in an article talking about a book, and I decided I need to have the book. And that's really kind of what a podcast can do for people, or getting out and speaking, just
yes.
you're not reciting the whole book. You're giving the little tidbits away,
Yeah.
piquing their interest. Wow, that was
A
really interesting.
trailer.
Yeah, exactly. I need to know more. I'm going to buy the book.
Mm, mm. Well,
So,
we did last year. I was involved in two multi-author books, international bestsellers, I may add. The first one, we had the opportunity of doing a book launch and signing in. There were six authors based in Perth. We hired out the State Library of Western Australia. Very lovely affair. And I said to the other girls, look, would you like some coaching on how to read from stage? And they went, oh, yes, please. Every one of them benefited phenomenally. I went to see one of the girls in person, and I got her to read a snippet of her chapter, and I said, hang on a minute, can I stop you? And then I modeled it for her, and she picked up very quickly what I was doing. She read it again and went, I can feel the energy rising. I said, I can see it too. And that's what every single one of them brought to the event. And the feedback we got from the audience was, I really can't wait to read the rest of the book. I mean, I'm going to be reading with your speaker in my ear as I'm reading it. So it's those little snippets, those teasers, those trailers
yeah,
that are so important. Yeah, exciting.
awesome.
Okay, so Frank, is there anything else? Have you got any special things coming up that you want to let our audience know?
Um, I always have the networking hub. I always have programs going on. I do a free program. Same day I do the networking hub at 4 p.m. Eastern. I do which is 4 a.m. your time. Sorry.
It's all
Um,
right. We're a global audience, so people will be
yeah,
picking this up from
yeah.
US, Canada, Europe, Australasia,
Um,
New Zealand. Yeah.
but I do programs just to help people get networked, and I just I want to help people, and you know, it comes back to me eventually. It
Yes.
does. I'm not worried about it. I do have one of my books is not for sale. It's called The Giving Journal. It's free. Um, and I can certainly get you a link that people can go and they can download. They don't even have to give me their email. I'm not fishing or anything like that. You just go take it. And it's a short little read talking about how I became really focused on giving. So
beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Well, what we'll make sure that in the show notes for our particular episode, we'll have all your contact details. We'll make sure that we also have contact for the best way of getting hold of you is through your website and through LinkedIn, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll also pop in the link to your wonderful giveaway. Thank you very much. That's very generous of you. And any other ways that we can get hold of you? So audience, you can connect with this gorgeous guy. You can work out how your networking is going to improve your ability to get to your wider audience as well. So thank you so much, Frank, for sharing with us your stage to page to page to stage journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.